Have you been struggling with not feeling a sense of peace in your soul? Welcome back to the Parable Podcast. And if this is your first time listening, thank you. I'm your host, Danielle Zapchenk. Joining me today is my friend, Jenna Holmes. She shares candidly about what God did with her doubt and the overwhelming peace that he provided her.
It was just so transformational for me to think this is not the end. This relationship might be dead, but God has so much more for me on the other side. And he absolutely changed my life from stay-at-home mom, no job, no means for a place, to blessing me with an apartment that I prayed for and blessing me with a job that I prayed for. It's absolutely beautiful.
Here's my conversation with Jenna Holmes. I love how God connects people back to other people that you've met in the past. Jenna and I met probably like 2 or 3 years ago at a conference. You were like a small group leader. And then we saw each other at another conference like 2 years later. And I am just thrilled that God has brought us back around to each other and that we get to hear your story today. Welcome, Jenna.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, well, Jenna, I know we're in the midst of the fall season, but I'd love to know, what do you love about fall? Do you have a special memory of fall? Does fall feel frantic, or does it feel like we made it through summer?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to be asked that question because I love fall, and I feel like so many people, when you ask them, what is your favorite season? They're like summer or spring. I love fall. I love crunchy leaves. I love crisp, cold air. I don't know. It just brings such a freshness, I think. And it's definitely my favorite season for sure.
Jenna, you're the mom to 4 kids.
Yes, I am.
Four kids. Mm-hmm. What is one of your things that you love to do with your kids that just it makes you and your heart happy?
Wow. Yeah. So this year we recently bought a subscription to the Brookfield Zoo. And so that's something that we do. Yeah, it's so fun. Mondays I'm off. And so every Monday when it's warm, of course, but we go to the zoo and we just spend the whole day there, and we love it. I mean, we love looking at the animals. We just love being outside. There's a beautiful park at the Brookfield Zoo that they just get to play at. And because we go on a Monday, no one else is really there. So I have so many pictures. They walk right up to the glass and they get to look at the animals, and no one is budging them out of the way. They feel like VIPs, which is so nice.
Yeah. I would have to say my first job out of college was events manager at the Brookfield Zoo. So I know, I know that zoo well. And also I use that zoo quite a bit in the early stages of motherhood. Be like, we're just going to go run around. If you could pick an animal that you could be at the zoo, which one would it be?
Oh, easy. Sea lions. The sea lions or the seals. Those are our favorite. They just look like they're having so much fun. And they're definitely the most active, which I just feel like, especially being a mom of 4, that's greatly attuned to my life stage. We're very active. So
shifting gears a little bit, when you just the season that you're in, what would you say consumes your thoughts the most right now?
Well, as a mom, and I don't know if every mom can relate to this, but this is definitely my truth. I desire to have control over all things that my kids are doing, that, everything that they're seeing, everything that they want to do, everything in our home, everything in their future. So I would say probably just the future and what we have in front of us, what trajectory they're on is what I think about all the time. We were talking a little bit candidly earlier about school and transitions, and my oldest is going into 3rd grade and he's going to summer camp for the first time. We chose a Christian summer camp for him to go to, which is really exciting. So it's just this balance of okay, what does the future hold for him in this new environment and this new thing, and what can I do to make sure that everything is perfect for him, which is the answer is not much, except to love him well. But I would just say that I always think about like, okay, how can I help my kids do everything they can to make sure they're all good?
Gosh, I mean, when I think about that question for myself, like what does control my thoughts? I guess I didn't even use the word control. What do you think about a lot? But that would be the case of like, okay, how can I adjust this perfect way? Or how can I make this work? I'm always trying to align things, which is sometimes positive, but also like it does feel overwhelming when you're also like managing small humans as well.
Yeah. Well, especially when we align that with our faith, right? We kind of get into this like works-based, right? Especially with motherhood and parenthood, a lot of it relies heavily on the things that we do every day, that it almost becomes like, okay, if I just do all of the right things, everything will go well in my life and in their life. And sometimes that can't be farther from the truth. So it is tough.
What would you say like stirs the passion inside of you right now? I know you have your work, your day-to-day, your kids, but like, what do you feel like the season has created like a passion within you?
I desire more than anything to see people, a new generation of believers. And, you know, we say new generation, and I think in a lot of spaces that means, oh, you must mean the high school students. You must mean the college kids. No, I mean women who are maybe in their 30s or their late 20s or their 40s or 50s who are just encountering this wonderful person named Jesus for the first time. And they're wondering, okay, what now? What next? What does this look like in a life where I haven't lived the first half of my life in a way that would honor God? Or, you know, maybe that would require just a completely different shift. How do I navigate this? I desire more than anything to walk people through that and to see them flourish in this new path of belief.
I think that's interesting of like encountering Jesus for the first time, because even if we have had Jesus a part of our life, there's these moments that we've just like, oh, wow, I've realized something about him, something about his character, how he loves us in such a way. So yeah, that can be at any generation, any time of our life where God just like sweeps us up. When you think about like what's next, what's new for you, what would that be?
Wow, that's such a great question. And that is something that I'm praying about all the time. I could go on about this forever, but just to give you a little bit, I'm in a season where, so we talked about this at our last gathering, the catalytic nights that we went and we had some fellowship time with women. And one of the questions that Anna Maria asked us was, what season of life are we in? We talked about like spring that brings new, fall that is like kind of cold. It can kind of bring on some death a little bit. And then there's winter. And I shared that I feel like I'm in summer, where I feel like I just have layers and layers, and I'm warm, I'm hot, I'm like wanting to have some relief. I feel a little overwhelmed. And so really just navigating, God, what should I say yes to? Because everything is wonderful, right? All the things, especially in ministry and church life, it's good. It honors God. God delights in all these things. But I really believe that God has individual purposes for each one of us. And that does not mean every single good thing that is put in front of us. So I'm really just in a season of discerning, okay, Lord, what do you have for me to do specifically?
Well, before we jump into your parable, Jenna, I would be curious, how do you feel like you discern that?
Yeah.
Tell me. And I know that that's like how we're connected with God. Like that really helps us navigate. Are we like really listening? So for you, what does that look like?
First of all, I just want to say I'm still learning how to do this well myself.
So you're not a scholar in this.
I certainly am not, especially as I will admit, as someone who desires to have a handle on all things and control over all things. It takes a lot of surrender, which good. I'm still mastering the skill of. But I would just say for me, it's this idea of, we become uncomfortable in certain places when we've either outgrown them, when God is prompting us to move somewhere. As someone who's undergone a lot of transition and a lot of moving when I didn't want to, and, kind of craving the stability in the midst of having to move on from so many things. I am someone who tends to cling to things that feel safe and comfortable and where I can feel at ease and take a breath. But that's not always what we're called to. Sometimes we do need to move. And so God will kind of create friction and discomfort to do that. But I think it's being real with ourselves and taking the time to spend with the Lord and saying, okay, God, am I uncomfortable because you're growing me through this thing and I need to be steadfast and wait it out like we hear so often that he encourages us to do? Or are you bringing me into, my promised land and I need to get up and go like the Israelites did, even if it means I'm heading into a wilderness season? Do I need to have faith that at the end of that, you're bringing me into something that you've promised me? Or maybe just a surprise that you haven't necessarily revealed to me, but it's something that you've had in mind all along. So it takes a lot of spending time with the Lord, and I think having ears to listen and, kind of eyes to see what is next.
That's so good. Well, Jenna, I have had the pleasure of really digging in and hearing the hard parts of your story this last year. It's such an inspiration. So I'm really excited because usually I don't know what the person's parable is, but today I do. Yeah. So I'd love to hear what you want to share with us today.
So just a little bit about me. So I am currently working in full-time ministry. I have the absolute joy of serving at a church on the family ministry team. And it has been a journey to be in that place. So I've had over a decade of experience in ministry, both full-time and part-time and, kind of just an experience of serving in a local church. But it took me a while to get here and it took me a while to believe that this is where God was bringing me. So a little bit of a background. I grew up in a Christian home, so I have a foundation of faith by the grace of God. But when you looked on the outside of my home, we were involved in church. My mom was very charismatic, so we read the Bible a lot and we talked about Jesus a lot and the power of the Holy Spirit and all of those wonderful things that would give someone the impression that, oh my gosh, look at this faith-filled family. They're so great. But if you were ever kind of on the inside of my home, you would just see a lot of turmoil and a lot of destruction and a lot of the result of broken people. There was a lot of, alcoholism and drug abuse that led to a lot of physical abuse and emotional abuse. We were facing evictions a lot of times. So my home life was very unstable and it was very unsettling, of course. So really all I wanted to do was leave. Because I did grow up in a Christian circle, the culture around that and some of the things that I saw is, people were getting up, they were getting married, they were leaving their home. And so that was kind of the trajectory that I chose for myself. I had reconnected with my high school crush a couple years after we graduated high school. We were married just a few short months after reconnecting and we kind of started our life together. And I realized at that point, I was over the moon, excited and happy. I thought I had made it. I thought God has done so much for me. I was just so blessed and so grateful. I thought this was it. Now I get to live my life. I had this vision of being a homeschool mom. We moved to Texas, so we were just so excited to live this life. And then we kind of fast forward a couple years, a couple hard years. It's the pandemic. Aside from all of the marital struggles we were experiencing, again, I was recognizing this cycle that I was all too familiar with of emotional abuse and neglect and abandonment that I really didn't have words for yet, that I realized that I hadn't really healed yet from my upbringing is now resurfacing in my marriage. And aside from all of that truth and then balanced with the truth of we were in a pandemic. And so my husband was not working and we were so broke and we had a couple of kids at this point. So we're wrestling with all of those things. While I had a foundation of faith from my upbringing, at this point, Jesus was not really someone that I had a relationship with. I loved God, I believed in God, all of that great stuff. But did I really know what it was like to walk with Jesus through anything hard? No, I hadn't experienced him or encountered him, like we talked about a little bit in that way yet. So just a few short years later, after that point, my husband had filed for divorce. And I was shocked and I was heartbroken. I was devastated. And not because I had been so unaware of how much pain I was in and how hard our marriage was. I was very aware of those things. But aside from not having an encounter with Jesus myself, I believed what the Bible said about marriage and divorce. And I believed that we had made this promise to each other and that we had made this promise to God. And I was just so broken by the fact that I took that so seriously and he did not. Yeah. And, aside from all that, in the midst of that, so I'm facing like the spiritual struggle of that. But also, I was a stay-at-home mom. I had been out of the workforce for 5 years at this point. We had 3 kids at this point that I was essentially having to face. I'm going to have to take care of these kids by myself, and I have no job. I had no college education at the time. What was I going to do? So I was in absolute anxiety and stress every single day, raising these kids like by myself. I had no money. And so it brought me to a really low place of like, who do I have to lean on? And in that devastation and in that desperation, I had no other choice but to look to God. And it was kind of this balance of like trying to heal myself in ways that were not conducive of what my heart and my spirit was craving, right? There's this, again, me being someone who likes control. I'm like, I can fix this myself. Maybe I can just drink a little bit, or maybe I can just hang out with these people who are, just having a lot of fun, and I can kind of like heal myself in that way. And all of that failed, of course, as it does. And I had no choice but to turn to the Lord. And so in my desperation, I cried out again and again and again until I really began to hear from him. And I really began to understand, one, what peace that surpasses understanding is. When you look around you and you're like, okay, God, I am facing homelessness and I have no job and I have no means to really get a good job, but I have peace anyway. It was crazy to me. I'll never forget, I was making breakfast and my kids were in the playroom and I was just, again, overcome with anxiety. And I fell to my knees and I'm like, Lord, what am I going to do here? And it was just in an instant, just peace, peace. And I remember calling my pastor's wife and I'm like, is this what peace that surpasses all understanding is? And she's laughing and she's like, I think so. And she's kind of like talking to me and I just felt so crazy, but really leaning into that and thinking, okay, I'm good. I don't know what you're doing, God, but I'm going to be okay here. And of course, in the midst of this process, I'm feeling doubt. I'm like wrestling with what I am feeling in my heart is true, that I would have peace, but seeing my reality. And I was still in this point where I was learning a lot about what it meant to follow Jesus. And I was learning about this supernatural experience of what it's like to really have Jesus be a part of your everyday life and to believe beyond maybe what you're taught in church and kind of having this personal relationship. And God began to bring to me, it's a chapter in John, it's John chapter 20, 24 through 29. And it says, one of the 12 disciples, Thomas, was not with the others when Jesus came. This is after Jesus resurrected and he began making appearances to his disciples. They told him, we have seen the Lord, but he replied, I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my fingers into them, and place my hand into the wound in his side. 8 days later, the disciples were together again, and this time Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. Peace be with you, he said. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and look at my hand. Put your hand into the wound in my side. Don't be faithless any longer. Believe. My Lord, my God, Thomas explained, and this is the part that gets me. Then Jesus told him, you believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me. And that really changed my life from then on, because I was still in this place of being in the middle. Lukewarm, if I'm being honest. I was very lukewarm at this point, because while I was clinging in desperation, I wasn't living my life in a way where I felt like God was going to deliver me from my fear, or where I felt like God was going to bring me to a place of abundance. And I have to say, like, this really, I related to this a lot, because Thomas, they call him Doubting Thomas. But in my mind, I'm like, Thomas was being honest. He was being so honest that he was not going to believe until he saw. And how kind was Jesus to show him anyway. He had no reason to do that. Like, there was no reason for Jesus to reveal himself in this way. And when we look at this realistically, like if we're in real time, he's showing Thomas this, and he's showing his disciples, because there's going to be a time where no one is really going to see the scars of Jesus, and no one is going to be able to have this physical encounter with him again. But for us, it's so much more than that. that, because we get to see and believe that Jesus has resurrected, and we have that same power to be resurrected out of our struggles in our life. So that same power that raised Jesus from the dead can breathe life into the dead things in our life. And it was just so transformational for me to think, this is not the end. This relationship might be dead, but God has so much more for me on the other side. And he absolutely changed my life from stay-at-home mom, no job, no means for a place, to blessing me with an apartment that I prayed for and blessing me with a job that I prayed for. It's absolutely beautiful. And there was nothing I could have done or imagined or thought of to bring me to this place, but he absolutely did it.
Yeah, that is good. Gosh, Jenna, thank you for walking us all the way back to what your childhood was like. I'm so sorry for you, like that you experienced that. And I liked how you explained there was the outside of our family of what that looked like. And then there was the actual truth of what was going on inside. How did you deal with that as a kid? Did you feel like, I just need somebody to know what's going on? Or did you just continue to like hold that in and hold kind of like, we're a happy family every Sunday?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say I dealt with that by escapism. You know, I'd love to say that I held it all together. I know that there are people who do hold it all together, but I did not. I coped through drug use and underage drinking and hanging out with the wrong crowd that, you know, made me feel loved and accepted. And in the midst of that, it was God's grace that, carried me through, and that didn't allow me to like really hurt myself. Like there were a lot of people around me who did, but it was tough. Again, in my own strength and in my flesh, I tried to heal myself through means outside of myself, and it was just to no avail.
It makes me think about like, as we fast forward in your story, when you are kind of just like reeling with some hard years of marriage and just kind of like the same feelings of like, there's this outside portrayal and the inside. Was it hard to let people in? Did you have any kind of community that you could say like, hey, this is the reality of what is going on? Or were you searching for that?
I was so blessed to be a part of a church community that had walked through what I was walking through, and maybe not even once. Some of them had walked through this a couple of times, which was even more encouraging. And they were women 10 to 15 years older than me who really took me under their wing and gave me a perspective of life on the other side of wilderness and struggle and pain. And I forever still, I love those women. They're some of my best friends. I'm a little farther from them now. I've moved from that area. We're about an hour away, so we don't get to connect as often, but I will forever be grateful for them if they're listening to this. I'm so grateful for you all, because without them, without God strategically placing them in my life, I don't know how I would have made it through.
You had mentioned that you kind of went into this marriage of like, oh, we're young. Like, this is what we're supposed to do. Like, we're supposed to get married. I think we love each other. So here we go. And also, like, when we make two people get married, that sounds like a bad word. When two people get married, we're bringing in two different personalities. We're bringing in two different like backstories of things that happened in our childhood. Have we processed them? Have we not processed them? All this stuff. And so when you get to the point where your husband serves you with divorce papers, was there like a sense of shame, or like, how did this happen? Walk me through, like, what was Jenna feeling when you saw those divorce papers?
I was feeling like a failure to myself, for one, because I felt like, okay, obviously, as someone who desires control and someone who kind of can fall into some like workspace faith, honestly, and a workspace mentality, I was thinking, you're just not enough. You just didn't do enough. I was feeling like a failure to my kids because I was bringing them into a situation of another broken home. And there was nothing that I wanted more for them than to be saved from that. And I was feeling like a failure to God because this was sin. This was not something that he desires. You know, God hates divorce. And really because of what it does to us as people and the pain that we experience through that. But I wasn't thinking about that at the time. I was just thinking, being like, oh, this is what the Bible says. And here I am in the midst of that. So it was really hard. It was a struggle. And I prayed about it all the time. And just like a little caveat to that story in my prayer and my pleading with God that this was not something that I wanted. I prayed for restoration. I prayed for him to kind of reverse the hands of time. I would find out just a few months later that there was adultery in the midst of that, not just once or twice, not even just after he had served papers, but throughout our entire marriage, there was occurrence after occurrence of unfaithfulness. And, I went from this place of like, God, why? To actually having peace and understanding of like, you saw this when I didn't see it. And you're really bringing me through. You're really saving me through the midst of this turmoil. So as devastating as it was, I was able to see the good in the midst of that.
Before in our conversations, you had seen the good in so many different ways. And so I think even though when you ask the question, like, how do you have that peace that surpasses that understanding, when you are just like following those breadcrumbs of just like, I am just holding on to anything that I can just feel sane in and feel seen and find those pieces of hope, really. Can you share a little bit about like the ways that God gave you such peace and hope and understanding, like in physical, actual ways? Because you said you were about to be homeless with children. You're like, what do you do in that situation? What was God showing you?
During this time of devastation, desperation, after my season of being angry at God and being like, I'm going to do this my way, and realizing I certainly cannot do this my way. You are the only one who can heal me. I started reading my Bible a lot. I started listening to a lot of sermons, and there was this one time, it was a little bit of a glimmer of hope. I was driving down this road and I was just like zoning out. I think I just got done crying. And so I was just in this place of like, okay, I'm just going to enjoy this drive. And I was listening to a sermon, and I remember I was like praying. I was really just like complaining to God. I don't remember what about, but something. And it was like those half-hearted, like, oh, can I just, like, are you here? Like, are you even listening to me? And in the midst of that, I felt this like shift in the atmosphere, and I was really listening to the podcast, the sermon at this point. And so the pastor had said something about like Route 77. And I'm like, for whatever reason, that really got my attention. I'm like, okay. And then I look up, because I'm driving at this point, and the license plate in front of me just says 77. And I'm like, okay. Like this, I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. I was like, there is a shift here. Like, you've got my attention. You are listening to me. Sorry for sassing you. Like, okay. And I just felt this overwhelming like encouragement. Like, okay, you're going to go home, and I want you to read Matthew 7:7. Again, I'm not a Bible scholar at this point. I was not someone who read my Bible avidly. I was very much a culture Christian growing up. I went to church, I went to youth group, and hung out with my friends. Okay, so I'm in this journey of like really reading the Bible more for myself and discovering what it means to spend time with the Lord. So I didn't know what Matthew 7:7 said. I had no idea. So I go home, I read Matthew 7:7, and I come away with this verse. It's ask, seek, knock. And I felt him tell me, Jenna, you need to ask for deliverance here. Like, if you want to see goodness on the other side of this, you need to start asking me for it and believing that I'm going to do it for you. And I said, okay, God. And so I journaled that day. I was like, okay, here are all the things. Please, can I have a 3-bedroom apartment with central air conditioning? The house we were living at the time had no air conditioning, so we were hot all the time. And it felt so frivolous to ask, but I was like, can we just please have central air conditioning? And can I have a yard for my kids to play in? And, these things, like cabinet colors. I mean, really, I just began to dream, because why not? And he fulfilled all of those things, Danielle. I mean, in time, like from cabinet colors to central air conditioning, while I had no job, while I was transitioning my life. It was a miracle. And so, in that, if I may, I just want to encourage anybody who's listening. If you think what you're dreaming of is too impossible, there is nothing that is impossible for God. There is nothing that you cannot do with him in the midst of that, because he loves us and he cares for us. And he cares about central air conditioning if you want it. And he cares about cabinet colors, and he cares about the big things like a roof over our head and a job that we love. I mean, he wants to be included in those things. So just believing and asking for it from him. He desires that. He wants to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, when you said like air conditioning, it reminded me back to the beginning when you're like, listen, I feel like I'm in a summer season and I'm full and it's hot and it's sticky. And I mean, that really is like a picture of what you were feeling. Like you were feeling overwhelmed. Like we just need this release. Gosh, in this season of transition, I do have a couple moms that are single moms. And the reality is you still have to parent with your child's dad. I would love to know, and it's okay if you don't know, have you forgiven him? And then what does your relationship, like parent world, look like?
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. So short answer, yes, I have forgiven him. God, as I prayed and wrestled with this for a long time, God had given me this image or like this vision about him. So in the movie Frozen 2, okay, very like kid parent movie.
Yes.
There is a little... It's a little lizard and he's on fire. Okay. And he is like running around and he is setting everything aflame. And so when Elsa and the crew go to check it out, like everything is on fire and they realize like in the middle of the scene that it's just this tiny little cute lizard. Okay. Who is scared and is just like destroying everything against his better judgment, against his better like consciousness. And God had given me this vision and he spoke to me when I was looking at the scene. He's like, that is your ex-husband. He is scared. And he is just setting things on fire, and he's not doing it on purpose. He's not doing it with an ill heart or intention. I am working on him, and I am healing him. And unfortunately, hurt people, and he was just in the midst of that healing. So it gave me the eyes to see him as someone that God loves and someone that God is working on, just like he's working on me. I am the bad guy in someone's story. I love to remind people of this, right? Like, I am also the bad guy in someone's story out there. I am also a broken person who needs healing, who needs Jesus every day. And it takes some people longer to get there than others. But just this idea that he is also someone who is loved by God, who has made a mistake out of the brokenness of our flesh, it really helped me. It really just gave me some perspective.
Thanks for sharing that, because I'm sure that journey to forgiveness was really challenging. And, you know, it comes in waves because grief is weird like that, where you remember certain things. But thank you to the theology of Frozen 2, where where we can see, like, you're right. Like, we are all the bad guy. We all have sinned. We all have fallen short. And so how do we, even as crazy and hard and difficult as that is, how do we choose forgiveness? How do we choose grace when we're walking with those people that are always going to be in our life, whether that is our family or a past relationship or a friend that is possibly in the house next to you? You know, like, it's a broken world. Jenna, I'd love for you to spend some time, like, just talking to the single mom right now who is in that season of doubting. When you talked about Thomas, where, like, you believe because you have seen him. I'd love for you to just kind of share some hope or encouragement, or even maybe tips of, if you're in this place, this is what I hope for you.
I would just say, if you are just in this place where it's really dark inside, it's really dark outside, maybe you don't see God in the midst of your situation, maybe you've done everything that you can do, you're exhausted, turn to Jesus and ask him for relief, ask him for deliverance, because that brokenness that you're sitting in right now, you are in the perfect position to receive a miracle. You are in a perfect position to experience the power of the Lord. Just lean on him. Just ask him. Just believe that there is hope on the other side for you, and he will come through for you. I assure you.
Everyone, this was Jenna's first podcast, and gosh, girl, you did such a good job. I just appreciate the way that you share. You're just so willing. I could listen to you all day. Your voice is so nice.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
And I am just excited to see where God is going to continue to take you in this season of motherhood, beyond motherhood, how he's going to help you help other women encounter God in such a miraculous way. And that's only because of the way that he has already taken you.
Thank you, friend. Yeah.
I'm just so excited for you, Jenna. And God is just going to continue just to showcase like all the seasons, like, and taking you out of that summer season into something of growth, something of beauty. And so, gosh, thank you so much for sharing today. If people want to get connected to you, how can they do that?
Follow me on Instagram. I'm at JKA Holmes. So follow me, message me. I had a lot of people reach out to me after our Baton Pass gathering, and it just like filled my heart. So please message me. Yes. Send me your prayer requests. I'm happy to kind of come into agreement with you.
Jenna Holmes, thanks for being on the Parable Podcast.
Thanks, Danielle.
I am so thankful for Jenna's honesty. And if you are in a season of doubt and you want to have that kind of peace and that encounter with God that she was talking about, I know Jenna would love if you reached out to her. All of her contact info is available in today's show notes, or you can visit daniellezapchenk.com for details. Here are 2 reflection questions from our time with Jenna. Number 1, I'd love for you to journal through, does my inside world match my outside world? How are you portraying yourself on the outside? Does that match the inside? Are you hiding your authentic self because you don't want others to see it? I'd love for you to think and process through how you can adjust, how you can shift, how you can change that so you can be more authentically you. Number 2, if doubt has been racking your brain, I'd love for you to be honest, like Jenna said, and just ask him, talk to him, and see what God has in store for you. Thanks to my tremendous producer of a husband, Eric, for making us sound so great. I'm grateful that you took the time to spend it with me. Remember, your parable showcases how he is the one you can always lean on. We'll see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.